Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here. I have some great polling news today for the Conservative Party and Pierre Poilievre that I think explains how it is that Pierre Poilievre can be absolutely blowing Mark Carney out of the water when it comes to rally sizes, yet Mark Carney and the Liberals are still leading Poilievre and the Conservatives nationally by 2 to 5 points, depending on the mainstream pollster you look at. Some pollsters do actually have the Conservatives up, or it's a very tight race. But overall, I think that what the problem here is not that pollsters are trying to rig things or anything like that. Some of them are, but most of them I think are just not doing amazing work. And what they're missing is the non-voter, the voter who doesn't usually come out to vote but is voting this time. That is the demographic that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are winning the hardest. More than how much they are winning men by, they are winning people who don't usually vote. And if this election has high turnout, and it looks like it will, the Liberals might get absolutely swamped and not know what happened. Before I get into the numbers here, I just want to remind you guys, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you like my federal election coverage and you haven't done so yet, and leave a comment. I always like to see what people think, and it helps our videos out on the algorithm. By the way, I like to link the Conservative Party lawn sign up link in the description below and pinned at the top of the comments. Make sure you have a lawn sign. This is a do or die election. Let people know who you're voting for because it's not a time to be shy. So now I want to get into what David Coletto from Abacus Data has posted. And to be clear, this is the pollster I have been basically pointing out the entire time is the one I trust the most, at least in this federal election. Pollsters' quality comes and goes. They've been the most consistent. They haven't been having these wild polls where the Liberals are super far down and then it's a tie, and then the Liberals are way far ahead, then it's a tie again. When pollsters are having erratic numbers like that, it means they have a very erratic sample that is too closely monitoring the news. I actually heard the problem with Angus Reid is that they got all of their data for who they call an email for their polls based on like old air miles data, which means it's mostly upper middle class people who travel a lot. So it tends to skew a little bit more metropolitan liberal. So you shouldn't be shocked when they put out polls showing the liberals ahead by 5 or 6 points. Anyways, David Coletto here says, it looks like one of the big areas of disagreement among polls is what non-voters in 2021 are going to do. By the way, guys, Abacus Data was the most accurate pollster in 2021. In our latest survey, among those who say they didn't vote in 2021, the vote intention is Conservative Party 40%, Liberal Party 31, NDP 13. Among those non-voters who now say they are certain to vote, it is 46% Conservative Party, Liberal Party 34%, NDP 11. It is a 12-point lead, nearly a majority of people who didn't vote in 2021 but feel likely to vote this time. They are leading the conservatives are leading with this demographic by 12%. If this election becomes like a 72% turnout affair, goodness, the liberals are going to get swamped in so many working class ridings of people who are, people who are electricians, plumbers, basically younger working class men who never vote because they just don't care. I'm going to watch hockey. I'm going to watch whatever. I don't care. I'm going to go out with my friends. We're doing anything other than politics. Those people are ticked off enough to show up because the problem with the demographics the liberals are working with, which tends to be older women in cities, not to be, I'm being stereotypical, but it's generally what the polls say. That demographic already turns out in high margins. You really can't get older voters to show up more than they already do because older voters grew up in an era where you should vote because your parent told you to vote, and that's a good value to have. That never really got passed down past that point. So you always had millennials and Gen Xers and Zoomers. They don't vote a lot. This election they might, and that could be an absolute disaster for the liberals. This is what the turnout was like back in 2021. 62.3% of people turned out in the 2021 election. So there are still 37.7% of the vote that is up for grabs that could potentially show up. Now, let's be clear, probably 20% of the population will not vote no matter what. They just don't, they are just religiously against it in terms of how lazy they are. They just don't care. But again, if another 7 or 8% of the vote turns out and they are leaning conservative by 12% higher than they're leaning liberal, that changes literally everything. And by the way, you're not going to detect these people very easily in polls. Some people become more politically activated, and when they start getting emails to take a poll or an IVR poll gets them on the phone where they pick it up and they, punch in the number of the party that they want to vote for to indicate their support. Most of those people who don't vote, they're not going to become that active. They're voting this time because they like Polyev and they hate the liberals. But they're not going to suddenly start signing up to voter sample pools and answer questions and get on the phone and listen to the robotic voice for 5 minutes. They're not going to do that. They are simply going to show up, put a ballot in the ballot box, and leave. By the way, here's another piece of data that I think is interesting to look at. This is day one approval of Mark Carney when the election first started up in the mainstream polling average. He had a strong approval rating of 30% and somewhat approval of 24%. Only 11% of people somewhat disapproved and 28% strongly disapproved, which is basically saying conservatives don't like him. Now on day 10, things have actually changed quite a bit. His strong approval has fallen by 2 points. His somewhat approval has also kind of risen, but it's a little bit soft. But his disapproval has been rising steadily. That wasn't even the worst one that's come through so far, but at the start of the race, he had a net approval rating of plus 18. Now it's down to about plus 8, plus 9, and other pollsters have showed this too. Abacus data has been the least dramatic actually in demonstrating his approval rating has been falling. But as my friend Chris at the Great Canadian Bagels polling channel has said, the thing is that when a leader is new, and this is why Kim Campbell in 1993, her approval rating skyrockets and the PC voting intention skyrockets as well after she takes over for Brian Mulroney. The reason that happens is that she is a black box void. Nobody knows what she is, and so they are willing to fill her with all their hopes and dreams, assuming that she represents everything that they like. That's the same thing with Mark Carney, and he's not even quite past this point of his leadership yet. That as the election drags on, and the debate is definitely going to clarify this, he is not everything that the liberal media has said he is. He is not everything that people who were originally voting conservative, but maybe this guy is going to be even better than the conservatives, and he's going to be softer and nicer, and he's going to give me candy and all that, because people are always looking for someone who's, oh, can they be what we need, but also be nice about it? That's what you get a lot of people abandoning Polyev over. Oh, he's too mean. Once they realize Carney's incompetent, they're not going to be wanting to vote liberal. They'll probably want the competent person first and the nice, incompetent person second. Anyway, so then what I want to do too is I just want to bring up this other Abacus data poll, and this is about election framing. It's a bit abstract, but it's demonstrating that for the most part, people actually don't really want this election to be about Trump. Maybe it's good for the liberals, but the problem is it's also good for the NDP for the election to be about Trump, because the NDP can play the game of who's the most anti-Trump with the liberals. So the red section of each of these pie charts is asking people basically, do you think if the election is about these two things, either it's about Trump or it's about this other thing? Red is this election is about tariffs and Trump. Now, tariffs and Trump wins out when the other framing is which party is best able to deliver change in direction and policy. That's too abstract, so obviously the more clear question of Donald Trump wins out on this one. But look at this one. Which party, this is the purple one in the middle, which party is best able to reduce your cost of living? When you make that the framing up against Trump, 58% of people would like that to be what the election's about. And then even when you go onto this one, which party with the best plan to grow the economy? It is a little bit more narrow, but it's 53 to 47 people prefer the election to be about growing the economy and reducing your cost of living. Now, Carney is attempting to grab a hold of that cost of a living section of the pie by reversing himself on the carbon tax, getting rid of it, and trying to champion it as if he was the anti-carbon tax guy. I think enough people are going to see through that. It's not going to really matter. A lot of people are going to see this as him being clubbed into doing it by the conservatives and nothing else. But he understands that this election cannot be about Trump. And by the way, do you know what just happened? Canada's not getting significant tariffs on us. So the Trump issue from here on out, today was the peak, was the fever pitch peak that, oh my goodness, Trump could put a 70% tariff on us. That fear is gone. So now the election has to be fundamentally about something else. And when you actually poll people on who's better on the economy, who's better on taxes, who's better at getting stuff done for like people's finances, that's where Poilievre has the edge over Mark Carney. So not only do I think that there is this kind of Helm's Deep scenario we're in, to cite Lord of the Rings, where it looks like it's going to be a tough battle that the conservatives will lose, that we have a lot of voters who are not even showing up in these polls who are going to be showing up to vote for the conservatives. And then on top of that, I think as we get towards the debate and as the election narrative shifts, it's going to be shifting in a direction that Carney and the liberals don't want it to be. They want to be about Trump. They want it to be about external threats. They don't want it to be about actual competency and the record of the liberals. They want it to be about anything else other than that. Anyways, but that should be it for me today, guys. Just want to do this quick little update on the polls. I actually have another polling video that will be out tomorrow on a specific question I worked with. I believe it's always hard for me to say the polling company's name. It's Kolosovsky Strategies. We ended up coming together to cook up a polling question to see what the mood in the country was on a specific issue. And I will be making a video on that out tomorrow so that you can see, it's basically, I'm trying to prove my theory of politics. And I think I proved it pretty well with this poll question that's coming out. So look forward to that. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, do all that stuff, and make sure that you have a lawn sign on your lawn, unless obviously you're up in the 10th floor of an apartment and it doesn't matter. Anyways, so that's it for me today, guys. See you later.